What one doesn't have, the other is missing. Not a huge fan.
How about this one? If they each had half a brain, together they would still only have half a brain.
Really like that one. But the last one.
It's a little wordy for me, but it gets the point across.
Exactly. The last one gives it away. So, Brian. Oh, yeah. Sorry. My name is Jake. And with me, as always, my esteemed colleague, co-star. Oh, wait. Hold on. This is Slashers, a podcast about movies and more for those who love horror. My name is Jake. With me, as always, is my esteemed colleague, co-host, and cohort, Brian. Say hello to the mutant goons from the out.
What's up, goons? Man, I feel like you can talk like that in your fucking sleep, man.
It is ingrained in my DNA at this point. Brian, if I were to tell you there was a film where a woman desperately seeking answers about the disappearance of her husband is stalked by two men who ultimately commit acts of arson, animal cruelty, and murder. What movie would you think I was talking about?
I definitely wouldn't think it's Dumb and Dumber.
But it is. For Harry and Lloyd, every day is a no-brainer.
That's awesome.
For this week, we're doing another April Fool's episode where we're going to be advocating to you how Dumb and Dumber is in fact a horror film. So, Brian, shall we get into the trivia for this episode?
Yeah, there's quite a bit, surprisingly.
It's crazy.
Let's get right into it. So, I'm just going to kind of jump in here and there as far as different tidbits. No order whatsoever. I'm probably going to give away a little bit of the movie here. I'm assuming a lot of people have already seen this movie. It's almost 25 years old or some shit. So here we go. The first one I'm going to start out with is, if you remember, when they're in the car and they have Mental and with them, and they're both really annoying the shit out of him. And you have Lloyd, and he says, "You want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?" And I want to say not everybody, a good majority of the people within our age group, if you were to start something with saying, "Do you want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?"
Everyone would know.
Everybody.
Immediately.
Yeah. And apparently that was totally ad-libbed. It's totally ad-libbed, and I had no idea. And the note said that you can tell based on Jeff Daniels' face. So Lloyd is like, "Man!" and he screams, and then it almost like catches Jeff Daniels off guard.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And then he jumps in and he's like enjoying it. So I thought that was kind of neat.
It's amazing. Now, did his scream remind you of Godzilla? Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I can tell you, I don't know how many parents are probably super fucking pissed at that part of the movie.
Oh my God.
But could you imagine how many of the kids are just like repeating that over and over again?
How many times did you be like, "Mock, yeah, bird"? Yeah.
Except for the longest time when they had the hitchhikers with them, I always thought that they said sing.
I thought so too.
Right? And then I had it on old people subtitles, and I'm like, oh, they say see. And now it's great that I have subtitles, and it makes sense. So stop making fun of me for having subtitles, motherfuckers.
So we'll keep moving along in the trivia because there's a new format to their show where we try to get over with in about an hour or so. So this was the banner year for Jim Carrey. Earlier in the year, he'd had both Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and The Mask come out. Now, here's the crazy thing. All three of these movies got animated series. Ace Ventura had a show that went for 3 seasons. You had The Mask, had a show, 3 seasons. This one is the underachiever, which only had 13 episodes. It was produced by Hanna-Barbera Cartoons and New Line Television. I watched an episode. It's passable, I guess. The best part was seeing Boo Boo from Yogi Bear and Augie Doggy in the background of a scene. But really, the cast of characters for it was fucking great. You had Bill Fagerbakke as Harry Dunn. He was in Gargoyles, All Real Monsters, Jumanji, SpongeBob, Wild Thornberrys, Batman Beyond, Transformers from 2007, Brave and the Bold, Young Justice, DuckTales.
Woohoo!
You had Matt Frewer, who is Lloyd Christmas. You might remember him as Max Butt-Fucking Headroom and Russ from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And last, there was Tom Kenny as Weenie, who obviously was the voice of SpongeBob, Patchy the Pirate, Cosmo from Fairly Odd Parents, the Penguin and Batman, the Mayor and Powerpuff Girls, and Eduardo from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Like,
Jesus Christ.
It's crazy that show kind of failed when you think about, like, they had a kind of star-studded cast.
I mean, the amount of actors that were ready for some voiceover work is kind of insane, right?
Exactly.
I mean, honestly, if you think about it, if I can show up to work in fucking pajamas and not even have my hair done or my makeup or whatever and be able to get shit done, and I'm probably downplaying a lot of the work that goes into voiceover work, I'd be all for it.
So one of my favorite things in the whole world is watching Toast of London because of his voiceover work is the funniest shit ever. Steven, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you, Clem Fandango. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, just
I don't.
you
I
have to
don't.
watch Toast of London. It's so fucking funny. It drives me crazy. I just can't
Okay.
speak. I'm so excited. I'm in too deep. Whoa.
All right, so check this out. In the bar scene in Aspen, the line, "No way,
We've
that's
landed
great.
on the
We've landed on the moon," was not in the script, but made up by Jim Carrey on the spot. Which, honestly, anytime you have Jim Carrey ad-libbing anything, because I think this came out or was right around Ace Ventura, right?
Same year. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
1994 had all of them. And what's crazy is he was originally going to be making like I think it was $700,000 for this movie. Yeah, it was supposed to be 700,000, but right when they were going to finish negotiations, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective came out and it opened #1 in the box office. So they renegotiated and he went from 700,000 to $7 million, almost half of the film's budget. That's how crazy
Holy
1994
shit.
was for this fool.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy. How about this one? According to the Fairley Brothers, Jeff Daniels wasn't wanted for the film, but Jim Carrey wanted him in it. In order to ensure a no from him,
They offer that full 50 grand. And he was like, you know what? I'll take it. And then he ended up making 700 grand because of Jim Carrey. How crazy is that?
dude, that's like an ultimate like pat on the back, right? Like, I got you, bud. Don't worry
Exactly.
about it.
Carrey
That's
wanted it
fucking
and Carrey
cool.
got. Here's how bad the studio didn't want Jeff Daniels. They were like, fuck this guy. So for the whole first week of filming, he didn't have a single scene with Jim Carrey. Reason being, they were so convinced they were going to replace him, they didn't want to have to do reshoots with Jim Carrey.
Oh, dude, that's awful. Wasn't it said that apparently like his agents were like, dude, this is a death sentence.
Yeah.
Don't touch this whatsoever.
Please, God, no. And then he's like, I'm Stephen Baldwin. I'll take it.
Man, that's crazy. What's also nuts is like the amount of success that Jim Carrey had, like right around this time. So when the film went to the top of the box office, it gave Jim Carrey the distinction of being the first actor to have 3 films go straight to #1 in 1 year. You have The Mask in 94, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective in 94, and Dumb and Dumber in 94. Like, how fucking crazy is that? You have to have like the best year ever, right? Oh man, I remember the best years of my life. Actually, just one, 1994. No, well, actually, liar, liar, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, I always thought this was the most successful of his movies out of that time. Turns out, actually, The Mask made more money at the box office. It was actually the fourth highest earning film of the year. Yeah, to take into account, Dumb and Dumber was obviously the tail end of the year, but also it's PG-13 as opposed to PG. So that was another reason why.
Oh, there you go. That makes sense as well.
I try. So I'm sure for all of our horror fans, you're like, why the hell am I listening to these two fools blabber on? It's like listening to Dumb and Dumber on the podcast. Jim Carrey stayed in room 217 at the infamous
Overlook, which isn't technically considered the Overlook.
At the infamous Stanley Hotel, which was the inspiration for the Overlook, a la boom. Have you seen the deep fake where they put Jim Carrey's face on Jack Nicholson from The Shining? It's terrifying and I love it.
I don't think I've seen that. I think the last deepfake I saw was something to do with Back to the Future. It was something that you sent me.
Oh, it was Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr.
That's so good.
You know, I gotta say, the kid who played Elliot in E.T. and Dr. Sleep playing Jack Torrance, not that great. I would much rather have seen, if they could afford it, Jim Carrey just taking that role, even if it was just a bit part in that sequel.
There you go. The different actors that were apparently supposed to be starred as the main roles. You have Steve Martin and Martin Short. They were trying to have as to play Lloyd. And then you have Nicolas Cage and Gary Oldman.
Ooh.
Apparently supposed to play Harry and subsequently Lloyd as well.
Which is nuts.
I don't know. I feel like Nick Cage and Gary Oldman doesn't seem like it would sell.
Yeah, not at all. But Steve Martin and Martin Short, I think, could do a great job. I mean, if you've seen Clifford, you know, like Martin Short fucking rules. And obviously, if you listen to me speak for more than 5 seconds, you know I'm a huge fan of Jiminy Glick. So, isn't that right?
You have their chemistry from what the fuck was that called? The Padre Amigos?
The
Three
Three
Amigos.
Amigos. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, exactly. When did that come out? That was probably early 90s, late 80s, something like that.
Obviously, Brian, it came out December 12th, 1986, you fool.
Oh
Everybody
shit.
knows
So
that.
I mean,
It was directed by John Landis and had a budget of $25 million. The production company was HBO Films. Obviously, I said from memory.
the only thing I remember from that movie, obviously, other than the whole little dance where they thrust their crotches in the air, was the song "My Little Buttercup Has the Sweetest." It's so
So good.
bad. So apparently, they also were considering Corey Feldman and Corey Haim.
That's a big pass for me, dog.
I could not imagine that working at all.
No, thank you. So, you know how there was the prequel Dumb and Dumberer and the sequel Dumb and Dumber 2? 2 points I wanted to make on that. Dumb and Dumberer, originally Matt and Trey from South Park were going to do it. They had been advanced $1.5 million from New Line. And they're like, you know what? Fuck this. And they gave the money back because it's just, it was sacrilege. It's too difficult to do. And the movie kind of suffered for it. Here's something.
I kind of appreciate them for it.
I do. Here's my problem. The sequel. I watched it today. It is not the worst film I've ever seen. I was surprisingly amused at parts. But there's something absolutely fucked that happens in that movie. They shove their hands up their butts. They grab beers. They say, waitress, can we get another one? This smells funky. She gets them more beers. And that's obviously from Ready to Rumble. Here's the weird part. Lloyd Christmas says that he learned from the best and looks up to the sky and says, thanks, Mom, which means canonically, Lloyd Christmas's mom is a VHS copy of Ready to Rumble. Boom.
Do we just have like the 3 degrees of separation between Dumb and Dumber or Dumb and Dumber 2 and Ready to Rumble?
Yep. Idea theft. It's not a victimless crime.
So are we to get in statistics?
Yes, I am. On a budget of $17 million, it made $247.3 majillion.
My God, that's amazing. Like, do they even need to work anymore?
No, not at that. But what's crazy, what blows my mind is that 127 million was all it made in the United States, which means it doubled its money almost internationally. And I would love to see the French version of this film.
Yeah, and then you could imagine Jeff Daniels firing every single one of his agents.
Yeah, right. And you suck, and you suck.
You know, in the scene where they're handing off the hundreds of dollars to their little manservants. Okay, I'm done with you. So how much do I owe you? Okay,
here you go.
Here you go.
You know what? In fact, here's an IOU. You want to hold on to that one?
Yeah, exactly.
So the opening weekend was December 16th, 1994. Looking at the competition, you had Trapped in Paradise on the 2nd, Legends of the Fall, the 16th, Mixed Nuts with Steve Martin came out on the 21st, as well as Richie Rich. And here's the biggest competition for this film. On December 23rd, you had Street Fighter, the film, the movie, the motion picture, the fucking legendary Quick, Change the Channel. That movie fucking rips so hard.
You're telling me it's with Jean-Claude Van Damme?
And Raul Julia.
Well, I mean, he's the saving grace of the film, honestly.
Oh, yeah, he's delightful. The guy who plays Zangief is great. But the best scene in the whole film is when Chun-Li like pours her heart out to him, talking about how he and his like band of soldiers killed her dad. And he's like, that's the most important thing that's ever happened to you. But to me, it's Tuesday. And I was like, oh. That's the best power to have over someone, is to be like, you know what? You have literally no power over me. Jareth from the Labyrinth, bitch.
Here's the thing, though. I feel like I'm leaning more towards Mortal Kombat over Street Fighter as far as the video game movie around this time.
No, well, okay, movie. I can see why. Even as a kid, I knew Street Fighter the movie was
I
bad.
like how you were like, "Oh, well," until I said movie, and then you're like, "Okay,
Oh
yeah, I
yeah, okay, I can
agree
see
with
that.
you."
For sure. You want to talk video games? You're wrong. Anybody who thinks that Mortal Kombat is a better game than Street Fighter is a putz. Quote me on it.
Wow,
Boom.
wow. Honestly, I never played Street Fighter as a kid, so maybe it's just me not being raised in a proper environment.
Or it's because you're a putz. Boom. I'm sorry, that was mean. I take it back.
Ouch.
Don't
That
give me a
hurt.
fatality dog, or a babality dog, or a bestiality
Whoopsie.
dog.
How dare you?
Woohoo!
So the runtime is 106 minutes.
It's great.
What'd you think?
It's awesome. I think, you could probably cut a little bit of it, but I love the pacing of it. Like, I watched it last night and I was convinced I'm going to watch half of it, go to sleep, and then watch the other half tomorrow. No, dude, I stayed up till almost midnight watching this movie. And for a father of a newly crowned 2-year-old, that's saying something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like none of this movie really stalled at all. Every once in a while, you get these like in between scenes where it comes to like the police chief, I guess, talking to his detectives, and one of them randomly looks like he could be a model
Yeah,
with
dude.
his stupid fucking hair. And you're like, okay, I don't need to see any of this. You're really you're explaining that they didn't go one way when they should be going to another way.
Yeah.
Just get rid of those and you'll be in the golden like 95-minute range, and we're all the better for it.
Funny you mentioned that. There was even a second subplot, which is going to be about Mary's husband and him being like shipped in a crate and everything, but they cut that. So thank Jeebus.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. I mean, that's like what you're talking 120, 130 minutes. Fuck, man. That's just way too long.
Yeah. Unless it's based on a novella, not gonna work for me.
Unless it's like a Lord of the Rings film. I don't fucking care.
Yeah. One quick shout out. You had mentioned the detectives. You have to appreciate Felton Perry. He's the African American detective. Reason being, he is in RoboCop. He's the tastes like baby food guy. I will bring
I
up
like
the
that.
movies I love every episode. I will always mention Monster Squad. I will always mention RoboCop. That's who I am, damn it.
Is there any way we can include Monster Squad in this? I mean, you could just say Monster Squad a couple times and we'll just get over.
If I say Monster Squad in the mirror 5 times, will the kids show up in my bathroom behind me? Then I have to explain to my wife why there's a bunch of children in my bathroom. So let's skip that. No.
That's not going to be good. So it was written by the Farrelly brothers. Yeah, Peter and Bobby. The Farrelly brothers' first movie was Dust to Dust, that told the story of 2 idiot friends who worked at a funeral parlor. They sold the script, but it was never made.
Isn't that a bummer? And apparently,
Womp womp.
when it came to this movie, allegedly, there was a draft that was written by John Hughes. You know, the John Hughes.
Oh, you mean the guy that did like Breakfast Club and all
Home
those
Alone?
fucking Pretty in Pink and fucking 16 Candles and any other bullshit shit that came out in the 80s?
Yep. So he wrote one. This is confirmed by Kurt Honeycutt. And when he sent the incomplete draft and he sold it to the Farrelly brothers, but they had to remove his name from it. Then they had Bennett Yellen, who had wrote one episode of the cartoon and Dumb and Dumber 2 and Stuck on You and Joyride 2. So you could tell where his career's at. Allegedly, his first draft of the script was so disjointed and terrible that they had to peddle the film under different names later on. There was one about like power tools or whatever. But the reason being it had such a negative reputation. They tried to sell this movie for 7 years.
Yeah, that's so crazy to think about how hard these guys are trying to get this movie sold. And then after the fact, thinking about how much commercial success they had.
It's insane.
Imagine like what the original number was as far as like them peddling this and then like the executives on the table writing a number on like a little pad and then passing it back and being like, we will pay you this.
They're like, hot dog, you'll give us actual currency? Let's do it. Then years later, they're like, wait a second.
We got burned.
Produced by 3 gentlemen, Charles B. Wessler, who also be producing There's Something About Mary.
Yeah, then you also have Brad Cravoy. So apparently this guy's a bigwig, right? Cravoy has been directly involved in development, finance, production, acquisition, and distribution of more than 100 motion picture and television projects. He is the founder and chairman slash CEO of the Motion Picture Corporation of America.
And you gotta love
The
a guy.
bigwig.
He also worked on Beverly Hills Ninja, which is amazing, and Kingpin, which is also super good. If you've never seen Kingpin, it is the biggest financial flop the Fairley Brothers ever did. I think it made like $2 million at the box office, but after you factor in like marketing budget, it lost money. That movie is so good. Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's like one of Bill Murray's more underappreciated films.
It's so good. He's such a piece of shit. I love it.
He is such a dickhead, right? And you're like rooting for Woody Harrelson like the entire time. And
Hell
you're
yeah.
like, oh, dude, this isn't going to go well.
Remember at that time he was just the kid who was on Cheers, and now he's
Right.
Woody butt fucking Harrelson.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe was White Man Can't Jump, was that around this time? I don't know.
It was
For
a little
sure.
bit before, but yeah, I mean that same era.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he didn't really have a lot going on, and yeah, it was really crazy, right? And then you also had like the random roles thrown in between with the guy from Vegas Vacation.
Randy Quaid.
Yes, Randy Quaid as like the weird Amish dude.
I'm
is
back. Yeah, the dude from Independence
such
Day
a good-
who flies his
it's
jet
such
up
a
the
good
alien's
movie.
butthole.
Every time you had Bill Murray on, and his hair was just
it's
so bad,
good.
and you were just like, I want to reach through the screen and like pat it down and be like, okay, everything's fine, but like every scene just got worse and worse.
His head looks like if you only shaved one of your nads and you
Oh,
like
no.
had something happen and you had to like jump out of the shower and then you like had hair on one, you just like kind of like slicked it over the other one. That's what his head looks like in the movie.
I feel like every once in a while you get one of those stray hairs that pokes out of the front of your face.
Oh
right?
yeah,
That
the
just like
wiry one.
crazy old man hair
Yep.
that sticks out of nowhere. Like that was his hair, like
whole
his
thing.
entire hair.
Also produced by Steve Stabler. That's a horror movie name if I've ever heard it. He did Kingpin as well, Beverly Hills Ninja as well, and Biodome. The music, we have to talk about this. This is hugely important to me. The music was by Todd Rundgren, who you will recall feuded with John Lennon. He even wrote songs about how he thought John Lennon was a prick. Mark David Chapman, who ultimately assassinated John Lennon, was an avid fan of Todd Rundgren. So
Oh no,
that's in the backdrop
no.
of my mind when I watch this movie now.
that's awkward.
But the music's
Oh,
really
dude.
good. Like it's super soothing.
I feel like anybody who's just outwardly opposing any of the Beatles, you're not going to win a lot of fanfare.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I don't know, it's something just majority of the population is here and then you're just over here. So, I mean, I get it. Everybody should be their own person and you can like or dislike whatever you want, but
It's one of
Not
those kind of
liking
like
John
hot
Lennon,
take
huh?
things, or it's like hot take. The Beatles aren't that great, and it's like hot take. Nobody gives a fuck what you think, Donna.
or Karen.
Exactly. Why don't you go talk to the Beatles manager, Betch? Shall we get into
Right.
nicknames?
Dick names.
Nicknames.
Are we getting a little overboard with the whole thing?
We
Maybe
are.
we should just call it nicknames.
Nicknames. Nicknames.
Oh, that's basically, our generation right there. So I like that. Let's go with that. You just have to sing it every single week.
Jimothy Jim Bob Majimbo Jimmy Carrey as Lloyd Christmas. Now, I think this is kind of common knowledge. Jim Carrey chipped a tooth when he was a kid. Allegedly, it was in a fight, and he removed his cap from his tooth to film this film. How crazy is that?
Greatest decision he ever made in his life.
It's
because
so
it sold
good.
the film.
Yeah.
Didn't sell the film. It sold the character,
Yeah.
right? When you see him and you have image in your mind of Lloyd Christmas, there's two things that come to mind. Pumpkin pie haircutted freak, bowl cut, and the chipped tooth, right?
When he has his head through the window, yeah.
Fucking hand in hand,
It's insane. He's so uniquely himself in it. And I remember being a kid and being like, what's the movie magic? How did they pull that off? And then you're like, oh no, he just actually didn't have a chunk of tooth. Like, what the fuck?
It's so good. It's so good. And honestly, I wouldn't put it past the Fairley Brothers to include somehow how he got the chipped tooth, like as a kid, like a little flashback.
I think it's in Dumber Dumber 2, isn't it? or Dumb and
Is it?
Dumberer.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it's so iconic though that they have to include it in the subsequent films, right?
Yeah, you're totally right. And it's part of the character. Like he has bangs and a chipped tooth. Harry has frizzy hair and a butt crack. I mean, that's what you think of. Oh, and a cardigan. That's one of my favorite jokes of all time.
And when he has explosive diarrhea, his legs shoot out.
Oh!
It's so good.
Yeah,
I
dude.
laughed like a little fucking kid when I watched that today. And Michelle looked at me like with such disgust. She's like, really? Fart jokes and pooping pants and all of that stuff still get you, huh? I'm like, it always will. It always will.
It's like coming home.
It really is. Do you have anything for him? Honestly, I was just gonna call him Chip. It sounds really kind of, it's not hard to come from because obviously he has a chip tooth.
Oh, that's great. I think that's awesome. And speaking of chips, let's talk about microchips. Did you know Jim Carrey's favorite film of all time is The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, which stars Kurt Russell and Cesar Romero in a Walt Disney movie about a robot boy?
What? Never heard of that.
Yep. A computer's brain fuses with him, and it's awesome and terrible. And let me see if it's on Disney Plus. It's on Disney Plus. Go watch it.
Wow. I'm gonna have to steal that shit whenever I
Do the Mandalorian
don't
finally.
whenever I don't kind of steal your login. We don't do that.
You want to feel super old? Jim Carrey's a grandpa now.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, his daughter Jane Carrey is actually a musician. She did work on his show Kidding, and then she also did Dumb and Dumber 2. So pretty cool. Nepotism working out in a way that doesn't offend me. How about that?
One of the first films I feel like I saw Jim Carrey in, and I don't know if this was the first film he was ever in, but Once Bitten,
Oh,
I
hell
believe.
yes.
Right?
When
So
he has
good.
sex. Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. And dude, just imagining him as like a fresh faced, baby skinned little boy, right? I mean, he couldn't have been more than 24, 25 at the time.
Yeah, it's
Like,
crazy.
it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. It was a great film, actually.
So then we have Jeff Daniels as Harry Dunn. Crazy. We've already talked about how hard it was for him to get the role in the first place, but I have to talk about this. He once ran into Clint Eastwood while playing golf. Clint Eastwood is a big fan of this film and actually told Jeff Daniels that he had a similar situation when he was on a date one time. Later in 2002, he would be in a movie called Blood Work with Clint Eastwood, and that movie fucking rips. I love that movie.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. I mean, honestly, who'd have thought Clint Eastwood would be a fan of this film? I will give you $1 million if you can think of a comedy that Clint Eastwood is like really a fan of.
Dumb and
There
Dumber.
would be no way in there would be no way in
I want
hell.
$1 million.
No way. No fucking way.
A fun fact, in 1982, Jeff Daniels was in a Pepto-Bismol commercial, which is pretty great when you consider how he spends his night of leisure with Mary Swanson.
Yeah, that's not good, man. You know, you go on, well, you don't because you don't really have Facebook because you're like so fucking cool. But anyways, they have the media little advertisements that like based on your like preference because everything's collecting data off of shit that you like, even though you don't agree to it. And I'll get this like fun photo of Harry on the shitter with his legs splayed out. And they're like, wouldn't this be great to like hang in your bathroom wall? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And I point to Michelle and she's like, no, I don't think so. I'm okay,
Not happening, fuckwit.
I don't know. I thought it'd be a great idea.
I love it. I think you definitely should. You know what you need to do, though? Just build your own goddamn bathroom.
Yeah, well, that leads to a slippery slope of Brian having a man cave and never coming out and saying hello to Michelle anymore. So we're not going to go down that road, at least not yet.
Not yet, exactly. There's plenty of time to be unhappily married. Let's just talk to Al Bundy.
Right?
In an interview, Jeff Daniels was very candid about the difference between he and Jim Carrey in their careers. He even said, quote, I was Mr. Drama and he was Jim. And I think that's very eloquent because Jim Carrey is a fucking force of nature at that point, right? And then here, Jeff Daniels thinks of himself as something of a thespian. So it's pretty great the way that worked out.
Yeah, I feel like Jeff almost seemed like he just didn't need any of the limelight. And obviously with Jim Carrey, he's the center of attention and their chemistry just totally worked, right?
Yeah, it's not just Abbott and Costello. It's not just the comedic guy and the straight man. I mean, it's a really good give and take. And I think that that's amazing that he could get that kind of respect from Jim Carrey. It's amazing to me to see this kind of a buddy film. I would make me wish that there was a buddy cop element to it because it'd be like the best buddy cop film that comes to mind. Maybe 48 Hours because I just like that movie, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I think wasn't Jeff Daniels also in Speed?
Yes, he
I
was.
feel like he was. He was like the partner, right? And then he ends up getting killed. And I remember specifically as a kid watching this and thinking, obviously, it's really cool because it's got Keanu in it. And it's like Keanu Reeves, but also Jeff Daniels. And you're like, well, I grew up watching him in Dumb and Dumber. And he's cool because he's like a fucking sweet ass, like, partner in this shit. And then he gets killed. And I sincerely feel bad about it. I was like, yeah, God, I kind of want to cry a little bit.
Isn't his hair hilarious in that film? Because you just like expect hairy hair where it's just frizzy and all that, and it's like combed over.
For the
and perfect.
longest time, he needed hairy hair, which sounds weird if you have no idea what we're talking about. Like when you say hairy hair, you're like, yeah, because hair is hairy, right?
Wah, wah. Yeah. Apparently, the way they got it was just they had him shampoo his hair and then never comb it and never condition it, and it just naturally frizzed out like that.
I mean, honestly, I can do that just by waking up. You know, the whole like, oh, I have bed hair and I look like a model. That's never a thing, right?
Brian's like, I look like a model and I have bed hair. Hoo hoo. That's what you just said about yourself.
That's
You
never
fancy.
how that works. I look like Harry, basically, in this film. So it's far from it. Do you have anything for him?
Oh, goodness. Poopy pants? Oh, X-Lax.
There you go.
Smooth
call him
move,
X.
X-Lax.
X to the Z. Exhibit. No, we'll call him X-Lax. I like it.
When it comes to them getting Seabass to pay their tab, that's actually in another film that Jeff Daniels did. In the movie Something Wild, he basically pulls off the exact same scheme, and that's independent. It's not like they crowbarred that in afterwards. That was in the movie, and then Jeff Daniels did it, and they kept it. Like, how funny is it that you're parroting somebody? They're like, oh, I'll do that. Reminds me of when that guy Billy Bob from Varsity Blues was in Not Another Teen Movie because they couldn't find another guy to parody himself.
Oh, dude. It's like they're almost just like typecasting the fat funny guy, and you're like, I mean, it's a paycheck, right?
Yeah, right. I'm mad at it.
So next you have Lauren Holly as Mary Swanson. Now, I just want to go right off the bat and say, when I rewatched this today, I was like, okay, I have a perfect name for her. And maybe it's just me because I don't have an obsession over redheads like a certain co-host, but I was like, not the mom from Home Alone.
Catherine O'Hare?
I don't know. I was like, maybe it's her when she was younger and
Sorry,
a little
O'Hara.
more athletic. But I mean, like timeline wise, it doesn't make sense. They just look familiar, or they look similar, I should say.
I ain't mad at that. I actually don't think that's a terrible thing to say. And people don't give Catherine O'Hara enough credit. Like, dude, she's probably
Home
my
Alone,
celebrity hall pass.
Beetlejuice. She was in Beetlejuice. She was in a few other things. I'm sure you can probably regale.
Yeah, I gave myself carpal tunnel syndrome watching Beetlejuice. I'll tell you that. But as far as what you're gonna call, I think that calling her Catherine O'Hara is fine.
I like it. I was going to say not Catherine O'Hare, but yeah, we can just call her Catherine O'Hare. I like it. So apparently she was married to Jim Carrey right after this film
That
was
lasted like
made,
1 year. How sad is that shit?
which is kind of funny when you think about like, usually when it comes to these like on-screen romances, they're actually on-screen romances that lead to off-screen romances. But here's the case where you have her just completely being like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. And hey, let's give it a shot.
Right? I wonder if like I should have looked at this up, but I wonder if news headlines when they got married were like that 1 in a million chance.
Oh God, that's so funny.
Yeah. So she actually turned down an opportunity to be an Ace Ventura Pet Detective, and then because Jim Carrey turned out 3 of the most amazing films of all time in that same year, she actually got to be with him in this film, which is just crazy happenstance.
So here's the thing you got to think about. I don't want to be in this film with Jim Carrey. maybe after the second movie, okay, I kind of have an idea where he's a little bit of like a successful actor. And then the third time, she's like, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. And then she's like looking at the box office. I don't want to call her a gold digger,
But
but
she
by
ain't
the
looking
third
at no
time,
broke.
yikes.
Hey.
By the time the third film rolls around in this, 94, you can imagine she's just like, well, I don't know. This whole marriage thing sounds pretty good.
Hey there, Jimbo. Looking a little heavy in the bulge in the pocket.
Now, I'm not implying that she was just strictly after money, but they did give it a shot, and well, it failed.
Yeah. Because she's like, you mean your 1995 film career wasn't as good as your 1994 film career, which has been unparalleled?
Yikes.
Fuck off. You had Mike Starr play Joe Mentalino. Great horror trivia here. His brother is Bo Starr, who you'll remember played Sheriff Meeker in Halloween 4 and 5.
Awesome. That's so random, but I like it.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was like, wait, why are they calling this guy mental? That's really sad. Does he have something going on?
Right. I wanted to call him for his nickname. I'm a gas man. Skibidi-bidi-bop-bidi-bop.
Oh, there you go. I like it. I like it. We'll call him Gas Man. You have Charles Rocket as Nicholas Andre. He was in it for like a whole 10 minutes,
Yeah.
maybe.
He's just
I
a
don't
prick.
got anything for him.
Nah.
Yeah, nothing there.
Moving on, Cam Neely is Seabass. Cam Neely was an NHL player from 1983 to 1996. He started his first 3 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks before becoming a Boston Bruin, who ultimately retired his number 8 because he was so iconic. This is Cam Neely town. He had 14 career hat tricks and is one of only 4 players in NHL history to record 50 goals in fewer than 50 games. So basically,
Dude, what
that
a
means
stud.
that's fucking crazy. It means you have to be on point. Could you imagine? That's absolutely insane. That dude fucking rips, and he's funny as shit in this movie.
Okay, so I got a question for you.
Yeah, Bob.
Why did he not have hockey hair in this film?
It's weird, right?
Right? I mean, so you're a redneck. You have the trucker hat, but you don't have a mullet.
It's so weird.
And you are a fucking amazing hockey player.
And he played 2 seasons after this. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, man. I mean, honestly, I just want to call him Stud Muffin.
I'm a little disappointed, though. I gotta say, there is a post-credit scene in Dumb and Dumber 2 that does feature him, but it deserves to be more in the film. But basically, they're drinking shakes on a Zamboni as they're driving down the road, and Harry's like, "Oh, those idiots! I ordered a chocolate shake and they gave me a vanilla." And then Jeff Daniels is like, "Oh, those idiots! They gave me a vanilla shake and I ordered chocolate." And so they both just chuck them, and they hit a big rig, and it's Cam Neely driving it, and his guy's like, "Kick his ass, Seabass!" And it says that Dumb and Dumber 4, spelled FOR, is coming summer 2034. And I was like, I'm kind of into it, not gonna lie.
That's so good. That's so good. Honestly, his role in this film, as minor as it is one of the lasting things that comes to mind when it comes to this film.
It's
Another
truly
one of those random things that has nothing really to do with the actual storyline, but it just stuck, right?
Exactly. You had Lynn Shay as Miss Margie Nugaborn, who I just gonna mention her because she's great in Something About Mary and Kingpin, and when he calls her Noogie Burger is just delightful.
Oh, dude, I wasn't sure if at any time it was her that was making the dog sounds or it was the actual dogs whimpering, right? So that's not just me, right? Because he opens the doors and she's just like, and you're like, is that a dog or is that her? I mean, she might just be mimicking the dogs. I mean, there are some crazy dog lovers, but
100%. The last 2 people I wanted to talk about was Brady Bloom as Billy the blind kid. Also makes a comeback in the sequel, which is delightful.
Pretty bird.
I'd call him Pretty Bird, exactly, but I feel like he deserves credit because he does such a good job. And Rob Moran as the bartender. And you're probably going like, why would you mention the bartender? Because he's also in Something About Mary, Shallow Hal, and Hall Pass, and he's the villain in Kingpin. And for our horror fans, he played Paul in You're Next.
Yeah, for being like a side character in a film, the guy's been in a lot of shit and
Yeah.
he's been like major roles. So I think it's kind of cool. I think honestly, it just seems like it's like the Fairley brothers were just like,
Yeah.
hey, I have an extra part. Is let's just go down the list of people that we know and see who bites.
Yeah, the comedy Tarantino syndrome. I will make a point to say that Rob Moran also played bartender in another movie in 1994, which was The Cowboy Way. So he went back to the well of bartending twice in one calendar year. Amazing.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad.
We're going to blitzkrieg through this movie because everybody knows it. We're just going to talk about the part. It's going to be hard. I'm going to tell you right now because there's so many parts. I could quote this movie verbatim. As I'm watching it, it's one of those few movies where I'm like, oh, I know everything that's going to happen, and I still laugh, and it's great.
Yeah, I shit you not. I feel like 2 or 3 times within this film, as far as rewatching is concerned, I would say something 2 or 3 seconds before it happened, and Michelle would look at me and be like, "Honestly, how many times have you watched this?" I'm like, "Too many times for me to admit."
I've seen this movie more times than Harry and Lloyd can count to. So that
Yeah,
tells you.
yeah, it's pretty bad.
So we got to start off with the opening with lovely accent, New Jersey. And she says
Yeah,
Austria.
so good.
G'day, mate.
Throw
Let's put
another
on the shrimp on the barbie.
throw another shrimp on the barbie. Let's not. It's so good.
Straight from that into the misspelled credits. And I'm like, it just feels like home, you know? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I felt as sentimental watching this as a bunch of nerds who were like, Han Solo said he's home on the Millennium Falcon. Chewie. That's me with this movie. I'm like, it just feels right, you know?
Okay, so here's the thing. I feel like maybe it's just like the fun, quirky comedies that we've been doing lately. But was the intro song not included in another movie?
It was in
Why
the past
not
for
go
sure.
up? Why not go down? Da, 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 right?
Yeah.
That whole thing sounds super familiar.
It's in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
That song was used quite a bit in the 90s, for sure.
So it starts out right where you have Lloyd and he acts like he's the like wealthy to do person in the limo, but he's actually the limo driver and he's going to pick up a girl. And you find out that it's the most beautiful woman that he's ever laid his eyes on. And I feel like Jake could probably agree on that one, right?
Yeah, I wanted to eat that hiney with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
That's it. That's it.
Also, this movie references Silence of the Lambs, has to be noted.
That's
Horror
true.
fans,
That's
you have
true.
to acknowledge it.
That's another little segue into horror. But one of the funny things that I remember distinctly about this is when he's driving her from wherever he picks her up to the airport and he senses that she's like really scared. He turns around and he's like, well, you have nothing to worry about because
I have this cousin.
honestly,
I had this cousin.
a lot of people actually get killed on the way to the airport instead of flying. And oh my god, it's so good.
I got worms. Like, this movie is so quotable and delightful.
I'm sorry. The worm farm.
And what's crazy, you could tell this is the 90s and not the 2020s, because if you had an Uber driver who was telling you about his worm farm, he'd be talking about it like it was some like kitschy new startup, and he'd be looking at you as an investor.
It's totally true. So he drops her off, right? And it's so great how he's driving past and he sees her and he's like, goodbye, my love.
Boom. And she looks over and sees him with the airbag deployed. He's like, hi.
So here's the thing, right? If the airbag really came out like that, I'd be like, oh, dude, I'm totally cool if an airbag explodes like that. No. They take out your face. They break your fucking nose. Like, there's blood everywhere. The way they make it seem in this film seems like it's like a giant piece of bubble gum.
Super funny. So he sees that she leaves her bag, but she's doing it as ransom money. And he runs in, swipes in, takes the money, and chases her through the jetway. He's going through the causeway, and it's amazing.
Dude, do you recall the song, or like not the song, but like the music? Like while it's happening, it's like,
oh yeah,
it's like it almost seems like it's like the cartoon, right?
Yeah, like a bit of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. kind of thing. And so, sir, you can't go in there. It's okay. I'm a limo driver. And he runs off. And what's great is when he gets home to Harry, he says that he fell off the jetway again. and
Oh,
talks
that's
about like
so
leaving the scene.
good.
So this has happened more than once. So that's what the prequel should have been. Should have been the exact same movie, but you just change Mary's name, and that would have been
Right?
perfect.
And what's so beautiful about this too is it's simultaneously having both this happen to Lloyd and another thing happen to Harry at the same time, right? So it's not like it needs one thing to explain, okay, this is what's happening with somebody's situation,
Yeah.
and then this is what's happening with somebody else's. Like we're gonna get rid of this whole storyline at the same time. And that's what's so beautiful about it. It just kind of just proceeds into the next thing. So you have Harry and he's transporting the dogs. You find out he has a fucking creepy ass pedo van that he turned into a shaggin' wagon, and he's delivering dogs. The dogs end up covered in a bunch of like mustard and ketchup, and he loses his job. Lloyd loses his job because apparently you can't leave the crime scene of an accident, which I think is really great. And what's really funny is if you recall when they're talking about like their day after the fact, you have Lloyd explaining everything and how he lost his job. And then Harry's like, well, I lost my job too. And then Lloyd proceeds to say, you're one pathetic loser.
Right.
It's so fucked up.
So that draws a lot of comparisons that we talked about before with the movie Stir Crazy from 1980, where it's two guys who get fired from the shitty jobs in the same day. They both move west at the same time, and they do a road trip in a van, and they run into hillbilly locals. So it's. I don't think that it's as bad as everybody's saying it is. I mean, the concept of going west is like a time honored tradition, and it's the Magna Carta for fuck's sake. But it just has to be noted.
So you have the two people that were originally going to pick up the suitcase, right? They find out where they live and they're, checking out the place, and you see Lloyd and Harry and they're looking through the door and they're like, what the fuck? There's random people and they have a gun. I think that's so great how they're like, did you pay the gas bill?
Right. First thing that comes to their mind is like a meter maid.
It's so good. And they're like, dude, we gotta fucking blow this joint. So they leave and they're like, okay, well, you know what? Where do we need to go? And they go off somewhere and they're trying to find supplies because they're like, we have to kind of like skip bail essentially. And he goes out and he buys a bunch of random shit. When they come back, Lloyd finds Harry and he's all morose and he's like, dude, why are you so sad? He's like, oh, well, it's Petey. What happened to Petey? He
His
died.
head fell off.
That's so good, right?
Well, he's such an idiot. He thinks that's like totally possible that his head just fell off.
It's so good.
Came to that
It's
part of the
so
life
good.
cycle where the bird's head just falls off, and then of course that bird ends up in the hands of a blind boy.
So he's like, hey, let's go where the beer flows like wine and the women flock like the salmon of
Capistrano.
Yeah, Capistrano. And he's like, I'm talking about Aspen. He's like, I don't know. The French are a bunch of assholes.
Oh, so good.
That's so good. So, they take off and they go over to Aspen. And it's great because on the way there, they come across like sea bass and like the rednecks, and they're like, oh, excuse me, Flo? And
What's the soup du jour? And so Harry spills the salt, and so they throw it over their shoulder for good luck. It beans sea bass. Who's a dead man who just hit me with this salt shaker? He spits in Harry's burger and intimidates them.
they're like driving, right? And Lloyd's apparently has to take a piss.
Oh,
And
so good.
he's like, well, I kind of don't want to stop after you just like totally took advantage of all those crazy rednecks. So piss in this beer bottle. So
I
he
can't
pisses
stop
in,
when I
like,
started. It stings.
he pisses in like 5 beer bottles. And then you have the guy from Rocket Man. What's his name?
Harlan Williams.
Harlan Williams. There
And
you
sucking
go.
knocking a little bit of grandpa's cough medicine, have you?
That's so good, dude.
You'll keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you, buddy.
He's like, pull over. Oh, it's a cardigan.
Thanks for noticing. God
And then
damn
he
it.
takes a drink and he's like, it's funny. Right before he did that, I was like, Michelle's like, do you have like a tick going on? Like, what's going on? And then he does it and she's like, you're fucking ridiculous.
We are man children. If you haven't learned this about our show by now, like you need to move
Right.
on.
And then I just have to throw in my favorite quote from the movie that I still use to this day when it comes to like when I start work and there's a bunch of guys just like communing around each other.
Oh, you've said
And
it
I
to me about
walk up.
1,000 times.
I walk up and I like have my hands on my hips. I lean forward and I go, "Big gulp, huh? Well, see you later."
It's so good.
It's so good.
So they keep driving. They end up at this gas station. Harry's filling up the car. Lloyd ends up taking a piss. He finds out that he's in a stall where it implies that Seabass is there to get his dick sucked in a glory hole. And he's
Hey, I
about
didn't see a hole in the fucking stall,
he's
but
gonna
I
make
mean,
one with his rock hard Cam Neely cack.
yikes.
He's about to murderize Lloyd. Harry accidentally sets himself on fire and comes charging in, barrels through and puts his foot in the pisser and realizes like, oh, I just saved Lloyd's life as Lloyd's sitting there sucking his thumb. And I remember being as a kid like, oh, this is darker than I understand.
Right? And then can we talk about how he goes up to the girl and tries to be suave by
Just give
like
me the
asking-
damn number.
He's like, "Are those your skis?" Both of them.
Right.
So bad.
So they start driving. Lloyd has, he falls asleep at the wheel, and that's when he has the dream where he rips the guy's heart out with a doggy bag with the "Do you love me?" And she says no, but that's a real nice ski mask. Iconic. They realize they've gone hundreds of miles in the wrong direction because he almost crashed.
A couple 100 miles to like fucking like the Dakotas or some shit.
That John Denver is full of shit, man.
Yeah, that's another great fucking line is where they're just like, "Man, you figure the Rockies would be a little more rockier than this." Yeah, that John Denver guy's full of shit.
So the van breaks down and Harry just starts trekking it. And then all of a sudden he sees one Mr. Jim Carrey on a Taco 22 mini bike. I actually looked it up. And he pulls up and he's like, oh, yeah, I can get 70 miles to the gallon on this hog. And there's the famous, you do something like this and totally redeem yourself. You'll remember
so good.
that Harry spent his life savings changing his van into a shaggin' wagon.
Right. And then he traded away for a fucking little mini bike. That's pretty good. So they make it to Colorado, right? And you have them freezing your ass off on the way there.
And freezing their asses together with the piss stream.
Right. Another memorable line is where he says, "Hey, I have to go pee." And he's like, "Just go, man."
I think that's like our level of friendship right there. Like if you peed in my butt crack, it wouldn't be the worst thing.
It's so great too because they didn't just leave it at that. Afterwards, he's like, "Oh, it's so warm."
So gnarly.
It's just for that like visualization, right? They get into Colorado, and the first thing you see is them walking down the street, and they turn around and they go, "Wow, look at the ass on that thing." Yeah,
He must work out.
out. And that's like the little kid humor that I just thought was fucking amazing, right?
It's awesome. And so they look for Mary and they can't find her. So they're just sitting in like a frozen park at night. And Harry and Lloyd are there. And Harry's like, oh, my hands are so fucking cold.
So good.
And so Lloyd's like, well, here, take this extra pair of gloves I have. And that
my hands are starting to sweat.
That prompts Harry to try to murder Lloyd, and in doing so they crack open the briefcase and find out that it's full of money. So then they go on a spending spree getting the presidential suite. They buy a Lamborghini Diablo. They buy a bunch of ridiculous clothing. It's awesome.
They use $100 bills as like tissue as they're watching Pac Bell
a commercial, yeah. Which when I remember
good.
on The Office when Pam has her like pregnancy cry over the bank commercial with the dog, I was like, Dumb and Dumber did it. Sorry.
So they find out that Mary's last name is Swanson, and they also find out Silly Sally Slappy Samsonite. So they find out that she's hosting a gala for like some birds. So they end up having this like little montage where you have Lloyd trying on these different outfits,
Cinderella-izing himself.
Right. And of course they have like the most obnoxious outfit ever that as a kid, when I was watching, it was like, sign me up. Right.
Yeah, dude. He looks like a goddamn creamsicle and I love it.
So they show up to the gala and they're sitting there throwing their vibes out there. And you have Harry go up to Sally because Lloyd's too scared. And he's just like, hey, what's going on? I want to introduce you to my friend. and her mom shows up and she's like, hey, she hasn't been hanging out with anybody lately because she's so sad about her husband. Why don't you go on a few dates with her? And he's like, yeah, sure, why not? And meanwhile, he lies to Lloyd and says, hey, I got you a fucking date with her. I'm going to have her show up to the bar and you guys will hit it off. And right after the whole gala ends, one of the best parts of this is where you have, what was it, Lloyd or Harry? One of
It's
them.
Lloyd because he's so excited he pops the cork on the
He pops the
champagne.
cork, yeah. So he pops the cork on the champagne and totally fucking myrtleizes a bird.
As a vegan, I still had to laugh.
Yeah, especially right after the fact where they go up and he says, nice set of Hooters you got there.
Right. And so they have the sequence where it's Lloyd sitting in the bar and he's been completely ignored. And then you have Harry at the slopes with Mary, and you can see he's kind of falling for her, and it's just a bad situation.
The whole carrot and charcoal is so good.
Yes.
It's so silly, right? It's like you're like, okay, I know what he's gonna do with those. They're not going to be two eyes and a nose, but I'm gonna laugh my ass off anyways.
100%. And so from there, this is what prompts Lloyd to do the cackling like the evil witch of the West, because he discovers the situation, the surreptitious nature of his best friend, and he miralaxes his tea as he toasts him for good luck. And Harry spends the night on the John. Well, Lloyd comes in to save Mary. Oh, I have your briefcase. Why don't you come with me? We'll go get it. And because she's so desperate to get it back, she just leaves Harry on the toilet.
That's so bad. But at the same time, I mean, honestly, if I was in Harry's situation, I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much.
Yeah, right.
As I'm like trying to unbolt the toilet and throw it out the window.
As of course, that's Murphy's Law, though. That's like my kind of luck where it's like, oh, of course I take the nastiest dump on the broken toilet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's always the fear of mine. And it's like this unrational fear, I feel like, of like any time growing up when I'd have these like family gatherings and I'd be at like so and so's house and there'd be like a Christmas party and I'm just like going to town on some beans or something. And I'm just like, oh God. Yeah, never ended well.
So he takes her back to the hotel and then they get chased down by Mr. Bad Guy the Prick, and you find out that Harry gets stopped on his way up to the room. It's by the same lady who he screams at about the the number, the same lady who Lloyd is forced to listen to ad nauseum at the bar. He goes up to the room, and Bad Guy shoots him in the chest, and Harry shoots upright. Bam, 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 bam. Harry, you're alive, and you're a horrible shot. They stop the bad guy. You find out that girl was a cop of some sort. Who cares what denomination? And the whole thing has been a sting to try and stop this guy who is a kidnapper.
Yeah. And then the very ending of the film, I feel like is great. Honestly, I don't think they needed to change anything really, where you have everybody walking out and everybody's super happy to be alive and safe. And then you have Mary and she opens the door and her husband comes her husband comes out. And I want to say it's probably been, I don't know, a little bit longer than me, at least since Michelle's watched this.
Yeah.
But when she